5 creepy true stories from warehouse workers. Story 1. The vanishing pallet. The shift begins. The night shift started as usual, with the hum of forklifts and the clatter of pallets echoing through the massive, dimly lit warehouse. I clocked in and greeted my coworkers, but a strange feeling of unease settled over me, as if I were being watched from the shadows. As I walked down the aisles, I noticed a pallet stacked high with boxes that hadn't been there during the previous shift. I asked my supervisor about the mysterious pallet, but he dismissed it as a mistake and told me to continue with my work. The lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move of their own accord, making me feel increasingly paranoid. Every time I passed the pallet, it seemed to be in a slightly different position, as if someone or something was moving it. I started to hear faint whispers, barely audible but undeniably real, coming from the direction of the pallet. My coworkers claimed they didn't hear anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The whispers grew louder and more insistent, and I began to see fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure out of the corner of my eye. I decided to investigate the pallet more closely, hoping to find a logical explanation for the strange occurrences. As I approached, the temperature dropped dramatically, and I could see my breath in the air. The boxes on the pallet were covered in dust and cobwebs, as if they had been abandoned for years. I reached out to touch one of the boxes, and a cold, clammy hand seemed to brush against mine. I jerked my hand back, heart pounding, and saw a faint outline of a face in the dust on the box. The face was twisted in a grimace of pain and terror, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, and landed hard on the concrete floor. The whispers grew louder, now clearly calling my name, and I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away from that cursed pallet. My supervisor found me a few minutes later, shaking and pale, and asked what had happened. I tried to explain, but the words caught in my throat, and all I could do was point back towards the pallet. He walked over to investigate, but when he got there, the pallet was gone, vanished without a trace. My coworkers looked at me with a mix of concern and suspicion, clearly doubting my story. I knew what I had seen and heard, but I also knew no one would believe me. The whispers still haunted me, even after I left the warehouse that night. I could still feel the cold, clammy hand and see the twisted face in my mind's eye. The experience left me shaken and paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that pallet was still out there, watching me. I quit my job at the warehouse a few weeks later, unable to face another night shift. Even now, years later, I still hear those whispers in the dead of night, calling my name. What do you think was haunting that pallet? Have you ever experienced anything similar? Leave your comments below. Story 2. The Phantom Forklift. An ordinary night. It was just another routine night at the warehouse, with the usual sounds of forklifts and chatter among the workers. I was assigned to operate one of the forklifts, moving pallets from one end of the warehouse to the other. The warehouse was vast and dimly lit, with shadows lurking in every corner and the air thick with dust. As I drove my forklift down one of the aisles, I noticed another forklift parked at the far end, its headlights off. I didn't recognize the forklift, but I assumed it belonged to a coworker on break and thought nothing of it. An hour passed, and I realized I hadn't seen anyone near the parked forklift, which struck me as odd. I mentioned it to my supervisor, who assured me that all forklifts were accounted for and instructed me to keep working. The parked forklift seemed to be following me, appearing in different aisles wherever I went. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that the forklift's movements were too precise to be random. I decided to investigate, driving my forklift towards the mysterious vehicle, heart pounding with every turn of the wheel. As I approached, the forklift's headlights suddenly flickered on, blinding me with their intensity. I shielded my eyes and shouted for the driver to identify themselves, but there was no response. The forklift's engine roared to life, and it began to move towards me at an alarming speed. I tried to reverse, but my forklift stalled, leaving me trapped and vulnerable. Panic set in as the other forklift drew closer, its headlights glaring like the eyes of a predator. Just as it seemed I would be crushed, the forklift veered sharply to the side and disappeared into the shadows. My forklift roared back to life, and I sped away, desperate to find safety and answers. My coworkers gathered around, curious and concerned about my wild tale of the phantom forklift. We checked the warehouse security footage, but there was no sign of the mysterious vehicle. The footage showed only me, driving frantically through the aisles, pursued by an unseen force. My supervisor accused me of fabricating the story to cover for reckless driving, but I knew what I had seen. The phantom forklift continued to haunt my thoughts, its headlights burning into my memory. I started having nightmares, vivid and terrifying, where the forklift chased me through endless dark corridors. My performance at work suffered as I became increasingly paranoid and sleep-deprived. I confided in a few close friends, but they too were skeptical and dismissed my experience as stress-induced hallucinations. One night, I stayed late to finish a project, the warehouse eerily quiet and empty. I heard the unmistakable sound of a forklift engine, followed by the blinding flash of headlights. The phantom forklift was back, and this time there was no escape. It chased me relentlessly through the darkened aisles, its engine roaring like a demon from hell. I tripped and fell, bracing myself for the inevitable impact, but it never came. When I looked up, the forklift was gone, leaving only tire marks and the stench of burning rubber. I resigned the next day, unable to face another encounter with the phantom forklift. What could be driving the phantom forklift? Have you ever felt pursued by something unseen? Leave your comments below. Story 3. The Haunted Locker. I had a new job. I had just started a new job at a large distribution warehouse, excited for the opportunity and eager to make a good impression. The warehouse was a maze of aisles and shelves, filled with the constant hum of machinery and the chatter of workers. My locker was assigned to me on my first day, an old, dented metal box that seemed out of place among the newer ones. I noticed strange scratches on the door, almost like claw marks, but I shrugged it off as wear and tear. My coworkers warned me about the locker, saying it had a bad history, but they wouldn't elaborate. I laughed it off, thinking they were just trying to spook the new guy, and set about my work. Every time I opened the locker, a chill would run down my spine, and the air inside felt unnaturally cold. I found odd items inside that I hadn't placed there: an old photograph, a rusted key, and a small, carved figurine. The photograph was the most unsettling, depicting a man with hollow eyes and a sinister smile, staring directly at the camera. I tried to throw the items away, but they would always reappear in the locker the next day. My coworkers avoided talking about the locker, and some even seemed afraid to go near it. One night, after my shift ended, I stayed behind to investigate, determined to solve the mystery. The warehouse was eerily quiet, and the shadows seemed to lengthen and move of their own accord. I approached the locker, my heart pounding, and slowly opened the door. A gust of icy wind hit me, and I heard a faint whispering, like voices from another world. I found a hidden compartment at the back of the locker, revealing a small, dusty journal. The journal belonged to a former worker named Tom, who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. As I read through the entries, a horrifying story unfolded, detailing Tom's descent into madness. He wrote about hearing voices, seeing shadows, and finding strange items in his locker, just like I had. Tom's final entry was a desperate plea for help, claiming that something in the locker was trying to take him, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and spun around, but there was no one there. The lights flickered, and I heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty warehouse. I tried to leave, but the locker door slammed shut, trapping my hand inside. The cold intensified, and I felt something tugging at my soul, trying to pull me into the darkness. I screamed and yanked my hand free, stumbling back and falling to the floor. The locker door slowly creaked open, and I saw the photograph of the man with hollow eyes staring back at me. I grabbed the journal and fled, not stopping until I was safely outside the warehouse. My coworkers found me the next day, clutching the journal and babbling about the haunted locker. They took me seriously for the first time and shared their own experiences with the locker. We decided to burn the journal and the items from the locker, hoping to break the curse. The locker was removed and destroyed, but the memory of those cold whispers and hollow eyes still haunts me. Do you believe a locker can be haunted? Have you ever found something you couldn't explain? Leave your comments below. Story 4. The Shadow in the Storage Room. A strange discovery. I had been working at the warehouse for several years, familiar with every nook and cranny of the sprawling facility. The storage room in the back was rarely used, a dark, dusty space filled with old equipment and forgotten supplies. One day I was assigned to clean out the storage room, a task I wasn't looking forward to but accepted nonetheless. As I sifted through the piles of junk, I noticed a heavy wooden door at the far end of the room, partially hidden behind a stack of crates. The door was old and weathered, with deep scratches marring its surface and a rusty padlock hanging from the latch. Curious, I asked my supervisor about the door, but he seemed uneasy and told me to leave it alone. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate further, determined to uncover the room's secrets. I found an old key in a drawer nearby that fit the padlock perfectly, and with a sense of trepidation, I unlocked the door. The door creaked open, revealing a small, pitch-black room that seemed to swallow the light from my flashlight. As I stepped inside, the temperature dropped dramatically, and I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. The room was empty, save for a large, dusty mirror leaning against the far wall, covered in a thick layer of grime. I wiped away the dust, revealing a tarnished surface that reflected my image back at me, distorted and eerie. As I stared into the mirror, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. I spun around, but the room was empty, and the door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. Panic set in as I fumbled for the light switch, but it was broken, leaving me trapped in the pitch-black room. The shadowy figure appeared again in the mirror, closer this time, its eyes burning with a sinister light. I heard a low, guttural growl, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay and death. The figure reached out from the mirror, its hand stretching impossibly long and clawed, reaching for me. I backed away, my heart racing, and tripped over a pile of debris, landing hard on the cold, concrete floor. The shadow loomed over me, its presence suffocating and oppressive, as if it were draining the life from my body. I screamed for help, but my voice seemed to vanish into the darkness, swallowed by the room's oppressive silence. The figure's hand brushed against my cheek, cold and clammy, sending a jolt of fear through my body. Just as I thought I would be consumed by the darkness, the door burst open, and my supervisor pulled me to safety. The shadow vanished, leaving only the lingering sense of dread and the faint smell of decay. My supervisor warned me never to enter the room again and to forget what I had seen. We sealed the door with heavy chains and padlocks, hoping to keep whatever was inside from escaping. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was still watching me, waiting for another chance to emerge. Nightmares plagued me, filled with the glowing eyes and clawed hands of the shadowy figure. My work suffered as I became increasingly paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. I eventually transferred to a different warehouse, hoping to leave the horrors of the storage room behind. Even now, I still see the shadow in my dreams, its eyes burning with an insatiable hunger. I fear that one day it will find a way out, and I will be powerless to stop it. What do you think was lurking in the storage room? Have you ever felt something watching you? Leave your comments below. Story 5. The Poltergeist of Aisle 13. An ominous omen. It started with small, inexplicable events. Items falling off shelves, strange noises, and cold spots in the air. Aisle 13 seemed to be the epicenter of the disturbances, a narrow, dimly lit passageway lined with towering shelves. My coworkers whispered about the aisle being haunted, but I dismissed their stories as superstitious nonsense. One night, while restocking the shelves in aisle 13, I felt a sudden, intense cold wash over me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I had the unmistakable feeling that I was being watched. I turned around, but the aisle was empty, and the eerie silence only heightened my sense of unease. As I continued working, I heard a faint whispering, like a chorus of voices speaking in hushed tones. The whispers grew louder, forming a cacophony of unintelligible words that seemed to echo off the walls. I saw a shadowy figure at the far end of the aisle, its form shifting and flickering like a flame. The figure moved closer, and I could see its face, a twisted mask of anger and pain, eyes burning with an unnatural light. I tried to move, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot by an unseen force. The figure raised its hand, and the items on the shelves began to shake and rattle, as if possessed by a malevolent spirit. Boxes and cans flew off the shelves, crashing to the floor with deafening thuds, narrowly missing me. I ducked and covered my head, praying for the onslaught to stop, but the chaos only intensified. The whispers became screams, filling my ears with a deafening roar that made my head throb with pain. I saw the figure's face inches from mine, its eyes boring into my soul, and I felt a surge of terror, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, the figure vanished, and the aisle fell silent once more. I stumbled to my feet, shaking and disoriented, and fled the warehouse, not stopping until I was safely outside. My coworkers found me the next morning, curled up in a ball, babbling about the poltergeist of aisle 13. They took my story seriously, sharing their own experiences with the haunted aisle and the malevolent spirit that resided there. We decided to perform a cleansing ritual, hoping to rid the warehouse of the poltergeist once and for all. We gathered sage, candles, and holy water and performed the ritual with a mixture of fear and hope. The atmosphere in the warehouse felt lighter afterward, as if a dark cloud had been lifted. For a while, the disturbances ceased, and we dared to believe that the poltergeist had been banished. But then, one night, I heard the whispers again, faint and distant, but unmistakable. The figure reappeared, more menacing than ever, and the poltergeist's attacks resumed with renewed ferocity. I realized that the spirit was not gone, merely lying in wait, growing stronger with each passing day. We consulted a professional medium who confirmed our worst fears. The spirit was bound to the warehouse, and nothing we did could banish it completely. The medium advised us to leave, warning that the poltergeist's power would only continue to grow. I heeded the warning and quit my job, unwilling to face the terror of aisle 13 ever again. The memories of that haunted aisle still haunt me, and I can still hear the whispers in my nightmares. I fear that one day the poltergeist will find a way to escape the warehouse and come for me. Do you think it's possible for a spirit to be bound to a place? Have you ever experienced a poltergeist? Leave your comments below.